Dive into the pulse of Bills football with Turf to Tape, where veteran sideline reporters Sal Capaccio and film room guru Erik Turner deliver a one-of-a-kind podcast experience, combining Sal's unparalleled access to players and coaches with Erik's razor-sharp film breakdowns. The show bridges the gap between casual fans and hardcore enthusiasts. This is Turf to Tape.
This is Turf to Tape, presented by Thin Man Brewery. I'm your host, Erik Turner. As always, joined by my man, Sal Capaccio from WGR. Sal, happy bye week. And I know it's a time where you have, some time to yourself. So what were you doing during the bye week? What's going on in your life, buddy?
Yeah, we try to typically the bye week. A lot of times it's later than this. So we try to get away a little bit if it's in November, the fam, maybe a little somewhere warmer. The weather has changing, but this week, it actually turned out Syracuse had homecoming against Pitt. Yeah. So we went to the Dome, watched Syracuse play, and unfortunately, a loss for my Orange. Steve Angeli, their quarterback from Notre Dame, who was off to an excellent start, tore his Achilles a few weeks ago in that upset win against Clemson. So they have a quarterback named Ricky Collins, who is a transfer from LSU, and he's just not it, Erik. He's just not it. And it's tough, and they can't really move the ball very much. And Pitt really shut him down, and defense was playing well. But it's right before halftime. It's only 10-3 Pitt. Syracuse gets the ball on their own end. They try a couple plays, but Collins can't get a first down. They punt it to Pitt, and Pitt runs it back for a touchdown with like 10 seconds left in the half. And that was like lights out right there, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I tell you though, it was great to get my son, Max, who's 11. He's seen the campus a few times. I like taking him up there to the new house school, all the broadcasting stuff and all the new technology they're showing. Show him where dad went to school and show him, well, I bartended there. It's not a bar anymore. It's a boutique clothing shop. Do that. Marshall Street is great. And then the Dome is cool. And we had a really good time though. And of course have to go to Varsity Pizza and get a slice of pizza.
That's awesome. It's a fun time. Like when you have a bye, I think it's a little early to have a bye. It kind of stinks when you're talking about it from the Bills perspective, in my opinion. I think it was good timing for that bye, but you realize like how much you are kind of putting aside to cover the team professionally or cover the team as a hobby, like we do. And so it is nice to step back a little bit and get away from the game a little bit, but we're ramping back up now, as are the Bills. And, before we move forward in the season and they do, we want to talk about some things that maybe they were discussing during the bye week about their tendencies and the self-scouting and all of that, but also things that lie ahead, players that are coming back. And so let's start with that. Let's talk about Max Hairston and his window being open, what that means, and where do you stand and where do you think he stands about playing in the near future?
So the Bills have officially opened Max Hairston's window to practice. We know that because it was on the actual NFL official transaction wire yesterday. We have not heard from Sean McDermott yet. That will be on Wednesday, and he'll discuss it. So let me explain what that means for everybody. So the Bills now have 21 days, and Max Hairston has 21 days to practice with the team. He can practice just like any other player now. There's no restrictions on any of that. He doesn't count against the 53-man roster. So he'll continue to practice. Now, if the Bills feel, oh my God, he's ready, let's rock and roll, they could activate him before Sunday's game. He could play against Carolina, or they could wait another week or whatever it is, leading up to that 21 days. Once you get to 21 days. So let's do the math from really the day that he was activated would be October 21st. 20th was yesterday. I think there's a 1 day grace period. So let's just say the 20th though. Anyway, if you go 1, 2, 3 weeks out, 21 days, that's November 10th. All right. He'd have to be activated by Monday, November 10th. So let's just be honest. He's going to be activated by Miami, November 9th. I mean, that would work out that way. They could wait till the next day essentially, and then activate him, and he could play the following week. But to me, this means he'll be available latest November 9th against Miami. It could be the week before against Kansas City. It could be this week, but they have 21 days. Once they do that, they have to put him on the 53-man roster. If they don't do it in 21 days, he goes back to injured reserve for the rest of the year.
I'm excited, obviously, to watch him play and have him come back. I think one thing we kind of briefly touched upon in last week's episode, and something that I've shared on social media over the last week, is how bad the Bills are struggling in cover 3. And if you look at some of these cover 3 numbers from this year versus last year, in 2024, when the Bills play cover 3, and you guys got to realize cover 3 is the primary coverage across the NFL. Every defense plays cover 3 at the highest rate there is. So this is basically the base coverage of the league. And of course, it's got some zone tendencies in there, but also has guys near the line of scrimmage to stop the run. So this is the coverage of the NFL. So last year, the Bills playing cover 3 were 8th in EPA per play on defense, 2nd in success rate, and 10th in opponent explosive percentage. This year, they're 29th in EPA per play when playing cover 3, 27th in defensive success percentage, and 31st in opponent explosive play percentage. And a lot of that is the run and pass. It's not just one or the other. And I say that when we're talking about Max Hairston, because going back to his film in college, this cover 3 was the coverage choice of his defense and his DC there. And he had a lot of plays on the ball when playing cover 3. A lot of his pass breakups and a lot of his cover 3 interceptions came when in this coverage. And so it excites me because when you watch the Bills play cover 3 specifically, a lot of the passes that are being completed at a high rate are typically underneath, but more specifically are in that flats area to both sides of the field. And that's that area where the flats defender, like a linebacker or a nickelback like Taron Johnson, aren't able to get out there fast enough because there's another target inside. So they're kind of holding.
Mm-hmm.
The corners on the outside are playing so far off at times, defending deep, like you always talk about, defending that deep third, that they're not really able to trigger and come downhill and make plays on the ball. And that's something the Bills have struggled still through this bye week at making plays on the ball. So I want to see Hairston, again, ramp up and then maybe help the Bills, not just in cover 3, but overall making plays on the ball, being able to trigger and be at the catch point when those passes are thrown underneath.
Yeah, what I really loved about Max Hairston when they drafted him, when you go back and watch him, the thing that I think he does really well that the Bills really need right now is, you just said it, attack the ball. He to me represented almost more of a boomer bust type of player than what they've drafted recently, right? A lot of the players they've drafted recently, Eric, to me were, hey, this guy has a high floor.
Sure.
He's not going to be the superstar, but he's not going to hurt us. He's going to be really good for us. He's going to be good in our system. Hairston kind of was a departure for me, at least when I evaluated him, of that, which is, well, this guy might get beat once in a while. He also might make some plays for you that you desperately need. And if you can eliminate, as he gets older and as he gets into the NFL, if he can eliminate a couple of those risk plays that cost him, but still give you enough of those big plays, because you're not going to always eliminate every one of them and only give great plays. I understand that. But if he can do that, I think it'd be a big benefit, because the biggest thing the Bills have missed from their corners this year is being near the football, attacking the football. They have not, but we had that stat a couple of weeks ago. One pass breakup in the entire game. It wasn't even by a defensive back. It was A.J. Epinesa batting a ball against the New England Patriots. So that, to me, is where Hairston can really help. And understanding zone coverages, understanding zone scheme with the ability to play man, I'm excited to see him on the field whenever that happens here.
That's it. You said it, man. Like, the ability to play zone schemes, but the physical ability to play man coverage. And one of the ways, as I talked about to start, one of the ways to slow down a run scheme or an offense that is running the ball well is to bring guys down to the line of scrimmage. But you don't want to just man up, especially the Bills, because they don't technically have guys that can go mano-a-mano with the opposing receivers and skilled players. And so what the Bills are doing is, we're trying to stack the box, stop the run, or slow it down at the very least. But playing cover 3, it's just really come back to bite them. Mm-hmm. They're not able to just stop the run, but they're also giving up some explosives, 5 explosives versus cover 3 in that Falcons game alone. And so it's going to be nice to get some of these players back, like Hairston. And another couple guys that are coming back are Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi. Yeah. And so when we're talking gap integrity and the tackling issues that the Bills have had, and the injuries, especially Daquan Jones, Ed Oliver, how do those guys, Ogunjobi and Michael Hoyt, help stabilize or boost the run defense specifically for the Bills?
Well, listen, a lot of it could really come down to as well what's going on with Daquan Jones. And we don't know that right now, because he was injured in pregame warmups on Monday night against the Falcons. Right. And then Sean McDermott's called him week to week. So is he going to be available this week against Carolina or next week against Kansas City? I mean, it comes at a good time where Ogunjobi is coming back, because they're going to need him to play. They're going to need him to insert. I'll get to Hoyt in a minute. But Ogunjobi, he's a guy, if you go back and watch, and when he was signed, I talked to people in Pittsburgh and Cleveland because he had played for both teams. And the book on him from them was basically like, he's going to make some flash plays. And then maybe in the fourth quarter, you'd be like, where's Larry Ogunjobi been? Like maybe he's also going to be a little bit like, well, maybe I need my guy to make a stop, right? And you hope that he can be consistent enough where you're noticing him throughout the game. But this is not an Ed Oliver type of, oh my God, he's going to make 4 tackles for a loss in the backfield. This is a guy to me that can also, like Max Hairston, step in and help where you need most, which is help fill run gaps, help the run, his size, his strength, his anchor. I think that's what his role is going to be in this defense.
I think you nailed it. And a guy like him, a few things come to mind. You named the 2 teams he played for. A very,
yes,
hard-nosed, smash mouth type character teams in the Steelers and Browns. That whole division, obviously they just butt heads every single week when they play. And so having that type of grittiness and sandpaper is going to help this DT room when you're especially talking about how young they are. And I do think that Deion Walker's been great. He's been great at D tackle. He's made splash plays, but he's also given up some big plays. And sometimes you don't even notice them, as Babbage had responded to one of your questions last week about. But I think that it's going to help the floor of this DT room. We talked about that with Hairston. I think it'll help those, balance out that room. And yes, his strength, his ability to anchor, I think that is going to be great. But I think it's going to be the experience and the discipline to, hey, do your 111. Don't take those risks. Let the guys behind you do their jobs and play off of you, because as good as Deion Walker's been, you've seen Terrell Bernard struggle because he's trying to make up for the mistakes that TJ Sanders or Deion Walker makes. And you see Terrell Bernard having a rough start to this year when it comes to not just a pass, but if we're talking about run defense specifically. And so I think that'll help, kind of solidify and maybe give a higher baseline from play to play when we're talking run defense when you bring Ogunjobi back. So what about Hoyt? I know this is probably like, it just brings a smile to my face to see this guy coming back.
Yeah, you and I talked a lot in preseason about how much we liked his game, right? I mean, every game it seemed like he was flashing. Now, understandably, there were times where he's playing against second or third stringers. The Bills gave him a lot of work in preseason because they knew he's suspended. They knew that they wouldn't have him, and he's going to have to get that work. And he played against guys that were inferior to him. But even when he was with the starting unit, I'll tell you, even in training camp, I love his motor, number one. He's a super energetic guy, and that only takes you so far. You got to be talented. I just like his game a lot. I think it fits in with what the Bills want to do. And, he's been compared to, and I understand why, and I've said it, Lorenzo Alexander and how the Bills used him. The difference there could be also, though, Lorenzo Alexander came to the Bills a little bit later in his career, right? He wasn't quite the same player, and he still was very good because they moved him around and they found a spot. Now, Lorenzo told me when I said this to him and compared Hoyt after the Bills had signed him, hey, what do you think? This is a guy that's very much compared to you. He said, my first year in Buffalo with Sean, they had to still figure out what to do with me.
A role, yeah.
Right? Like he said, once we figured it out, that's where it kind of took off. I thought it was really interesting that Zoe said that, and I think the Bills come into this situation with Hoyt with a plan, right? They know what they want to do. Something I picked up on a while ago was, I think it was Brandon Beane who said it specifically. When they had signed him, we had talked to the front office and Brandon and Sean about Hoyt and Ogunjobi. He said something to the effect of a guy we had watched and seen for guy we were watching the last couple of years.
Pro scouting. Yes.
That tells you, like, that's a guy they knew, hey, when he becomes a free agent, he'd fit in our system. Now, again, I'm going to say what I've said all last couple of weeks. I'm not telling everybody he's Bruce Smith. I'm not saying that. What I think Michael Hoyt is, though, is somebody the Bills have really banked on having in their defense to allow everybody else to fit in their roles better, to move him around, to kick him inside, to play off the ball, to play on the ball. And when he can do that, somebody else can play something to take advantage of a mismatch, maybe, where you don't have that on your roster until he plays. And that's why I'm excited to see him.
I agree. I think his motor, if we're talking run game, I think his motor on the backside of plays, chasing, the running back down from the backside of a run that's going away from him, I think that's going to show up a ton. I think when teams are trying to run play action off of that and boot out, he's going to stay home and he's going to force the issue on the quarterback who's trying to bootleg and get outside the pocket and make a throw down the field. As a pass rusher, it's scary because the numbers show, the analytics show how good this pass rush is, but it still feels as a fan that it's not really showing up and it's not really having the effect that it should when you're a top 5, pass rush team as far as pressure percentage goes, or a top 10 sack percentage team. It's not really registering quite yet. And I think by adding a guy like Hoyt and what they have kind of shown us with the Javon Solomon stuff where he's in a 2-point stance and he's on the line of scrimmage as like a D tackle and then rushing and then dropping. And you're adding more pieces and more weapons for the defensive side of the ball, which the Bills need in some of these situations, in those high leverage situations. So I'm excited to see how they use him. It's going to probably take some time to work him in, but I do agree with you. I think they've had a plan for years, but they've had a plan even more so once they realize,
Yes.
okay, we got this guy. Now we need to start cooking up some things for him. He's going to help the pass rush. He's going to help disguise who's dropping in the coverage, who's rushing the quarterback. He's going to be fun to watch going forward. So I'm excited to see those two guys, Ogunjobi and Hoyt, get back for the Bills, get on the field for the first time this year in the regular season. So I do think it'll fix their their personnel up front and augment what they've been doing well, as I said, getting pressure, but also mix up some things because he can drop in the coverage.
Yes.
When I had him on in the film room, one of the things he talked about was how important going into those third down meetings and how important he was when it came to calling the plays, like the stunts and the games, but also going in the coverage, dropping out and being essentially a linebacker at times. That's what's so fun about his diversity.
I love that you brought up like somehow the numbers don't kind of mesh with the eye test, right? A little bit, but the numbers are pretty real for the Bills as far as getting to the passer, even though you don't kind of realize it. Now, let me give you an example. Sacks per pass attempt. Okay, if you're at the Bills are over 9%, 9% of dropbacks, they get to the quarterback and sack them. That's a big number. And I'll put it in perspective in a second. But I just want to say, freaking Denver Broncos are at 15.3%. That's incredible.
Wow.
Right? I mean, they're leading the NFL 15%. No one is even close. And next is LA, the Rams at 10% of dropbacks. Then nobody else is above 10%. But here are the next teams: Minnesota 3, Detroit 4, Atlanta 5, Pittsburgh 6, and the Buffalo Bills at number 7. The Buffalo Bills are one of only 8 teams in the entire NFL. Cleveland is behind Buffalo. They're the next team. They're one of only 8 teams that actually are getting to the quarterback and putting him on the ground at 9% or higher of every drop back. Now, I think one of the issues is, and this goes back to something we talked about, is the rush is getting there, but I think it's getting a little too easy for quarterbacks to have an outlet because there aren't guys close enough on the quick routes, the quick game. The quick game has hurt the Bills. And if you go back to the AFC Championship game, that's what hurt the Bills. And in fact, after that game, I remember being in the locker room and some Bills defenders said, they came right out and just ran quick game against us, right? And they started moving the ball a little bit. I think the Bills have to be aware that teams are going to run quick game against them. That's exactly what the Falcons did to get at Drake London early on. That's why he was open right off. If you're going to get to the quarterback, you're going to bring pressure. Those quarterbacks are going to have hot reads. I don't think the pass rush is the issue. I think the pass rush meshing with the coverage is the issue.
Yeah, that marriage, right?
That's right.
That ability to affect either or from the rush stance and the pass stance. And it's definitely something that Babbage has talked about this season so far. And I'm with you. I think the pictures of the coverages are too easy from pre to post snap for opposing quarterbacks right now. And again, I think maybe adding guys like Hoyt back and how you can disguise up front and who's dropping and disguising that, it's going to take half a click longer, hopefully, for that opposing quarterback to see, oh yeah, they're in zone coverage, but what zone and who's spinning where and what safety is dropping back. And so I think that could help muddy up some of those pictures when we're talking pre to post snap. And I'm glad you talked about, those type of things when it comes to pressure percentage. According to True Media, pressure percentage for the Bills, they're ranked second overall at 43.3%. They're getting pressure 43.3% of the time. Sack rate 8.3%, 7th overall. So 2nd and 7th overall in those.
How much are they blitzing, Erik, overall?
They're ranked 22nd at 25.3%.
I mean, you think about isn't it a defensive coordinator's dream to get pressure with the front four?
Yes.
I mean, they're getting pressure with the front four, but they're still allowing teams to complete the ball underneath, and they're not allowing explosives. Hallmark of Sean McDermott's defense has been not allowing explosives. Guys still talk about it. You can't allow explosives. And I understand that. I'm to the point now where I kind of want to risk, if you're going to get an explosive, okay. But you know what? I'm going to make things a lot harder for you underneath now than it has been.
No doubt about it. So let's talk about nickel versus base 4-3 defense. So currently the Bills play their 4-3 scheme. So 4 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, the 7th most in the NFL at 25.4%. And considering what they've done in the past, that is far and away the most they've ever used. And so 7th overall, 3 linebackers on the field. That's not typical for the Bills. Typically, Taron Johnson's on the field. They're playing nickel. You can see how much of a difference their 4-3 base defense compared to prior years stacks up all the way back to 2020. And so my question for you is, we've had injuries to Ed Oliver. Taron Johnson's not on the field as often as he used to be. I know there's some struggles with him in coverage. I want to talk about that later. Milano's on and off the field. Those are guys that typically in the past have been on the field a lot, but also have played above the scheme at times, made those splash plays. And I feel like the Bills have missed some of that from a fan perspective, those splash plays, those critical plays in high leverage moments. So my question to you is, seeing some of these, base defense percentages, do you think that the Bills actually need to play Taron Johnson more and get him on the field more? Because if there's one thing Taron Johnson can do, it's trigger, make a tackle, blow up runs. I know, again, there's some talk about him struggling in coverage, and there's some truth to it. But I honestly think if you put Taron Johnson on the field over a third linebacker, I think he's going to be making more plays in the run and pass game more than a third linebacker would.
It's a great point. It's a great question. It's always the ultimate conundrum with the Buffalo Bills. I've asked this question to Bobby Babich and Sean McDermott over the years. Actually, to Leslie Frazier when he was the defensive coordinator. And they'll all give you the same answer, which is it's a tough decision. It's a tough decision. You never want to take Taron Johnson off the field. He's great at what he does. But you have to counter what the offense is doing if they start going with, bigger sets. Look, Taron Johnson is pound for pound one of the toughest dudes in the league, right? He's going to stick his nose in there. He's going to make tackles. If a team runs out there though with 2 tight ends, a fullback, it's tough on him. It's very tough on him.
Sure.
You're going to need more size. You're going to need a linebacker. But it shows here that maybe the Bills have to go back to, even in those heavier sets, relying on the smaller Taron Johnson. Now, teams have beat him like that. I remember when Miami came to Buffalo a few years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And they had a great scheme. What they did was they shifted and moved over and got Taron to have to move
into the box,
into the
A and B gaps. Yes.
100%. And Taron now is suddenly like a will linebacker.
And he was up against Armstead, like guys like that. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's a great scheme. Give Mike McDaniel credit. That's when the other coach has a great scheme. Sure. And the Bills could say now, you could say, well, why can't the Bills counter? Well, they can. Do you want Taron Johnson off the field? Do you want a third linebacker on? Because once they do that and they see it, now he's got to cover somebody, right? Yeah. That's the ultimate conundrum that you're in. The Chiefs in the divisional round where they won in Buffalo here a couple years ago, the game where the Bills missed a field goal at the end. You know what the Chiefs did? They ran 13 personnel. The Bills couldn't stop it. They just beat them up down the field because the Bills did not have enough size. And the Chiefs said, we're going to run 13 personnel. It is a really tough decision. I think the way that the game has gone, the fact that Milano's been injured a little bit here, Shaq Thompson's played really well. Don't want to take anything away from him. I still want to see Terrell Bernard a little more off the line of scrimmage. We talked about that. I think he's a little too close to how they're playing him sometimes on some of the schemes and what they want to do. I think maybe going back to a little more nickel than base, it can be an answer.
And if you weave this into the first segment about Hoyt and how he can add some diversity, sometimes he's going to rush, sometimes he's going to drop underneath. You can say the same thing about Taron. Now, if you're dropping Hoyt and you can send Taron, he's a very good blitzer. He's going to speed up that quarterback. He's going to muddy up those reads. And so I will say this disclaimer from those stats is that you played a lot of teams that had heavy personnel groupings, and a lot of times matchup dictates personnel.
Yes.
But I will say, even with that said, those numbers are way higher than even the tight ends, multiple tight end sets, fullback sets that those opposing offenses use. This was a calculated plan by the Bills to have Taron off the field a little more to combat run games. And I get it, but I just think there's a time where Taron is going to make plays more times than not, especially if you're comparing it relative to a third linebacker on the Bills. And I will say, I think the Bills have done a good job. We talked about Deon Walker, some of the ups and downs with him. I think if you're talking about playmakers through the bye week for the Bills, Deon Walker has been one of those. I think the staff has done a good job of kind of putting him in positions to blow up some plays. And I think they know how to do that with Taron. I think it's time to kind of scale back some of those base defense sets, regardless of the different personnel groupings that you may see in the next month or so.
And look, I understand he's had injury issues. I know. And fans clamor for, oh my God, they just got to move on from him. But the reality is the Bills are better when Matt Milano plays. They're just better. when he
Yeah.
plays, when he's on the field. He
Yeah.
he helps.
He opens things up.
I
for
know
sure.
that I know that you can't totally rely on him right now, and you want consistency with reliability. I totally get that, but they're a better team. I mean, look, it's not just because of Matt Milano, but in the first half against the New England Patriots, they didn't really do much offense. Second half, he didn't play. That's when he got hurt.
Right.
And that's when they had a lot more of their success actually and scored a lot more points. So I think getting Matt Milano back would help. We just don't know if he's going to be playing this week or when he's going to play, and you don't know how reliable it can be.
As far as the injuries go, is it tomorrow that we kind of find
Yeah.
out, get an idea when the injuries or what the injuries are and Daquan and all that? Is that tomorrow?
Yeah, so Sean will speak tomorrow, Sean McDermott, at about noon. He'll give us a, hey, here's who's going to participate today in practice. Here's what I have in these guys. He'll probably say again, Daquan Jones week to week. We'll see how it goes this week. He won't practice today, something like that. Or he's going to be limited today. That would be great. If Daquan Jones is limited, that'd be great. And offensively, if Josh Palmer could be even limited, that would be a great sign, right? That's the guy that they're gonna need. I mean, we're watching Daquan Jones, Josh Palmer, Dalton Kincaid, Curtis Samuel, and then the two safeties who both got banged up during the game against the Falcons.
Yeah, no doubt. So we'll be paying attention to that tomorrow. So let's go to the offensive side of the ball, and I want to talk about our tapped in segment presented by Thin Man Brewery, and it's something that Collinsworth brought up during the Atlanta Falcons game about tendencies. And when we're talking bye week, when you're talking self scouting, this is where teams start their tendencies, what they're doing when it comes to play calls and things like that. And the thing that he brought up was shotgun versus under center tendencies. And if you look at shotgun, when the Bills are in shotgun through the first 6 games, they passed the ball 78.7% of the time. That's 6th overall, which means they ran the ball 21.3% of the time, which is 27. So very heavy pass tendency when they were in shotgun, through the, first part of the season. So my question to you is, do you have ideas or things that they could do to, obviously just hand the ball off a little more in shotgun, but things that have worked in the past that could offset some of these tendencies? Because the Bills are looking at this when it comes to self-scouting.
Yeah, for sure. So the bye week is going to have them basically, it's more about them, right? Like, they're going to prepare for the Carolina Panthers, but it's more about them. It's more about, what do we do? What do we not do? How are teams defending us basically right here? I would like to see a little bit more under center play action. I think it helps the Bills, especially when they go 13 personnel, they go 12 personnel, Eric.
Yes.
And they really help them a lot, because we've seen now when they run those sets, they have the ability to do a little bit more and create matchups, right? So I'd like to see a little bit of that. I have to go back. I know he's played long enough now, or maybe it's not, but I do remember early on in Josh's career, was it Ken Dorsey maybe, who said that Josh didn't prefer as much doing that, going under center, but that was early in his career, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And things have evolved, things have changed. So, like to see something like that. But I do think the Bills will make it much more about what are they doing the teams are defending during this week. But they will obviously have an eye towards Carolina starting, now, and saying, how are we going to attack this particular team? And obviously Carolina's 4-3 and they're playing pretty well. And look at their defensive numbers. Their metrics are really good. They're actually, top half of the league and maybe even top 10 in a lot of different categories.
I think by just adding some runs, and when you're talking about shotgun, especially if we're just focusing on first and second down base offense stuff, mixing up some runs, that could definitely help open up other parts of your playbook, because you're not just tipping your hand and saying, okay, well, guess what? If they're in shotgun, they're just passing. So you can open up some things. It can mask whether it's a run or pass, obviously, and that can help the run game. I think when I went back and watched their 2024 games, and we're talking in that first and second down and 7 yards or more base concepts, their run game, they were really good at their tackle pulls. They ran that a bunch, where Spencer Brown or Deion Dawkins was getting out in space. James Cook was, getting some of those explosive runs. They had that played down. That was their play of choice last year. That was their bread and butter. And I feel like we haven't seen that all that often this year. So I think that's something they can get back to if we're talking first and second down and long runs from shotgun. And we talked about a little bit when having answers versus pressure.
Yep.
In those second down situations, maybe their first down run doesn't go well and you got second and 6 or 7 and more, getting to a manageable third down with a wide receiver screen or a tight end screen to Shakir or Kincaid, those are plays in those situations that worked out really well last year and allowed them to, in many ways and times, skip third down. And so we talked about how much they struggled with exotic blitzes this year on third and long. Well, either do one of two things. Don't be in third and long or skip third down altogether. And so I think by being better on early downs,
Yes,
you can do those things and you won't see those load fronts with those 5 guys on the line of scrimmage as often, running all those crazy games like Ulbrich did, if you're not in those third and long situations. So I think those are some things that they can work on to, get out of that. Because when I watched those first and second and long plays this year, I saw a lot of QB scrambles. There weren't many really good executed second down and long runs by the Bills. They're all scrambles from shotgun, in a passing type play where Josh just took off. And so I think if you're looking for that tapped in area that they need to work on this bye week or self-scouting week, it is the tendencies of just running the ball or passing it from shotgun or under center. They need to mix it up a little more, even though you talked about running play action or running passes from under center more. People need to keep in mind too that when quarterbacks across the league are under center, they only pass 29.7% of the time.
Right.
The Bills are currently sitting at 20.4, which is 30th. It's towards the bottom of the league, but the perspective and context is when quarterbacks are under center, it's typically a run, and they typically only pass on average 29.7% of the time.
So I think, all of this is a schematic and what they can do. The other thing is, they have to start winning a little bit more one-on-one.
Yes.
And they're not doing that enough. Right. And that's the wide receivers. That's whoever out in a route. And now I think Josh Palmer did a nice job of that Monday night. And unfortunately he got hurt. And I think he was in for a big game. They were planning on using him. Not having Dalton Kincaid hurts. He's been winning and he's getting down the field a little bit. So when you start reducing down, you're relying on, Tyrell Shavers to win on the outside. No disrespect. He's earned his spot and he's been great at kind of his journey. But when you're relying on Tyrell Shavers to be your guy down the field to win one-on-one, that becomes an issue. You need your guys who you can rely on to win one-on-one. And they have to do a better job of that. And that hasn't been happening. But so you got to have the scheme match up with those guys actually doing that and becoming available, becoming open.
No doubt about it. And so that was our Tapped In segment presented by Thin Man Brewery. Big things are brewing at Thin Man. The fan favorite Pils Mafia is getting a bold rebrand, and it's bringing back up introducing Mafia Light. It's the new tailgate essential. Mafia Light hits different with just 3.5% ABV and only 80 calories per 12-ounce can. Drinks like water with notes of beer. We appreciate Turf to Tape joining us this year and sponsoring this segment for us. It's going to be interesting as the year develops to see the different players and plays that make it into this Tapped In segment. And I know the offense has, had some rough spots and some lulls, but I have a feeling that we're going to see a lot of those players eventually, make their way into these Tapped In segments. So with that said, let's move on to the next segment. And you touched upon it, the boundary receivers.
Yes.
Okay, so a source told me that defenses are using those 5-man surfaces, that load front that we talked about, the Falcons just brought to the Bills' plate last week and really overwhelmed that offensive line and Josh Allen. That teams are using that to contain Josh Allen. Again, it's minimizing those escape lanes because of the 5 guys who could, blitz, or 6 guys that could come, but also forcing those perimeter wide receivers to win one-on-ones outside. So who do they look to in order to combat those looks, Sal?
Well, I think that you, number one, look to a guy like Khalil Shakir, who has always been a guy who can kind of be open right away off the line of scrimmage, right? That's a guy that I think has to start becoming available, but it's not like they've ignored him or anything like that. Or maybe his targets are down this year compared to last year, but I think Khalil Shakir's got to be a guy that's got to be an outlet. But I'll go back to also, I think the running backs have to get a little bit more involved in the passing game. That has not happened this year. Ty Johnson has caught 2 passes, I believe, all season so far. James Cook really hasn't been involved. Now look, you have to understand, everybody, if you're going to send all that pressure, the Bills have to keep guys in sometimes, and therefore the running backs have to help out in pass protection. So the answers aren't as easy as us just sitting here and saying, go do that. But I do think that you're going to have a little bit more, of a willingness they're going to need to say, okay, we're going to just have to have him leak out throwing the ball. I'm watching some teams last night who did that really well last night. I think it was Seattle, maybe Sam Darnold, a couple times where here comes Houston. They like to bring pressure. Bam, just dump it right off. You see the running back looks like he's in the block. All of a sudden leaks out, throws it out to him. Like those are things I think the Bills need to get to a little bit more often. And then, of course, you do have 3 tight ends who can catch the ball. And if you're going to have them on the field, and you can have them stay in a block, or you can have them, hey, run 5 yards, turn around, let's get an easy 5-yard completion. Remember, we talked about this against the Baltimore Ravens, and fans complained that the Bills weren't throwing the ball downfield, but those are the plays that worked when the Bills said, look, we're just going to make sure we take what's given to us. And I think they have to start doing that again.
Yeah, a few small things. Again, it's not just one thing. There's no one easy button answer for how Bills have to overcome those, blitzes, those exotic looks, those load fronts. But getting Josh to the line of scrimmage quicker in those third down high leverage situations can help him be at the line, set the protection, calmly, but more importantly, uncover, okay, which guy could actually, blitz here, and which guy am I not going to have accounted for by the offensive line, tight end, or running? Giving him more time at the line of scrimmage, I think, is really important in these situations. But he also has to do a better job of just manipulating the pocket and maneuvering the pocket, because too often, so early this year, we've seen him try to escape out the back of the pocket, which is something he hasn't done in so many years. And so moving him in the pocket, whether it's planned or unplanned, it needs to be better. And, one thing Brady can do to help is, in these situations, moving the pocket, right? Moving that launch point, moving that platform for him, getting him out so he can see the field better when these crazy blitzes may be coming. And you nailed it, Shakir. If we're looking at guys, the Jimmies and the Joes, Shakir and Kincaid better be in his line of vision, one of his first or second reads on these type of plays, because when I went back and watched these situations, when he saw those 5-man fronts, those exotic looks and blitzes and pressures, Josh always found Shakir and he always found Kincaid. And like I said, sometimes it's screens, sometimes it's a shallow drag, and you saw Shakir separate versus the Jags last year and get an explosive off of it. And so getting it out of Josh's hands and into Shakir's hands, to Kincaid's hands, in various ways, and slants, quick outs, anything to minimize that damage that a sack or negative play could take, is really the biggest answer. It's one thing that Josh did better than anyone, almost historically, last year, was minimize those negative plays by just getting the ball out of my hands.
Yeah. And to answer John's comment here, he said, I think Elijah Moore should be used more in the passing game. And I don't disagree that that's a guy with the skill set you'd love to see. I just have it in the back of my mind thinking about that play in Atlanta. Elijah Moore is on the field because the Bills are down a couple of receivers. Josh, it's the fourth quarter. Josh throws what he thinks Elijah Moore is gonna break off the route, and he would have been open if he does, but Elijah Moore keeps running. Like, if you're not on the same page, like, that's something that concerns me. Like, because if you're only getting a certain amount of reps because you're not on the field as much and all those kinds of things, I agree with you. Like, but all of those things have to come together throughout the week where you're repping with those guys and you're understanding what each guy is seeing in that situation.
Yeah, and especially when you talk about that play specifically, and you said when teams are blitzing like that, like crazy, you got to keep guys in. They kept running back and tight end in on that play. They had only 3 guys in a route, and that guy, Elijah Moore, was throwing the ball and he didn't snap the route off. And again, maybe it's Josh, maybe it's Elijah, but either way, those guys need to be on the same page. And you may not get all the reps that you need, but when you are given that opportunity, you need to be on the same page with that quarterback. I mean, I think that is really what I'm sure Elijah Moore has learned so far. Like, if every route is live, and I need to be where my quarterback expects me.
Yeah. And that's something that Ty Johnson did a lot of last year when they needed him, when he was on the field on third down. And again, I'll go back to if they can get him involved a little bit more. And I know they like him on third down. You know, a guy that's sitting on the practice squad injured, Gabe Davis, has always been very good at that with Buffalo Bills. And I don't know his situation. That's another guy, by the way. We had somebody earlier ask me about Terrell Lambert. Thank you. And I forgot to mention him. When Sean talked about injuries after the Falcons game, I think he put Bernard in the boat of day to day. So I wouldn't worry too much about it right now. So hopefully he'll be back. But you have Gabe Davis on the practice squad injured. And I'm not telling you Gabe Davis is the savior for this wide receiver core, but he's a great example of a guy that has fit into what the Bills want to do, because he does exactly that. He becomes available for Josh on a lot of those little scramble drills and moving the pocket for him.
And, if there was several things that Gabe brought to the table, and one is down the field. He made big plays down the field. Like, the numbers back that up. He's maybe not be the fastest guy. He definitely is not the fastest guy, but he always was on the same page. I shouldn't say always, because that Kansas City game, that wasn't true. But I think
the Philadelphia game where they weren't
the
on the
Philly
same page
game,
was the big one,
that's
right?
the game
But you're right. They're
right.
generally understanding of what they're
They have an
both seeing.
explosive, yes, they have an explosive connection when it comes to throwing the ball down the field. Obviously, Gabe has the DNA that the Bills love when it comes to blocking, doing all the little things, even blocking on screens, wide receiver screens, stuff like that. He's good at that. But there's something to be said about him. And they haven't opened up, from what we've heard, they haven't opened up his window yet.
Correct.
I was told that it was probably going to be either this week or next week. So with it being Tuesday right now, who knows? But I do think that he could play a role. And again, it's a role. It's not wide receiver 2. It's a role that the Bills honestly could really use, especially if you're talking like you started the segment playing outside of script, outside of structure, finding the eyes of the quarterback outside of the play and making big plays down the field in the scramble drill. I think Gabe has done that for Josh a lot over the years. So the last segment I want to talk about, any type of roster moves or trade possibilities. I know it's something that fans love to talk about in the bye week. Knowing this regime, though, and what they prioritize, and maybe even some of their salary cap situation, if they were to make a move, what would that be for, and do you expect it?
It would have to be either for wide receiver or corner, I think, right? I mean, a lot of people think safety. Look, here's the way I look at safety with the Buffalo Bills. I understand they've struggled. I think it takes a lot for the Bills to feel they can go and bring somebody from the outside the organization to come in and play that spot. The next safety for this team is going to be Jordan Poyer. I mean, if they're gonna make a change at safety, it's in house, I think, and it's Jordan Hancock. The two Jordans. I can't see them going outside the organization and bringing a safety in because I think they believe, for right or wrong, however it could turn out, the onboarding of knowing the system and understanding everything that goes into playing that position in this defense and being on the same page, which is why, by the way, Cole Bishop didn't play a lot last year once he came back, right? And we know that. So I don't think it's safety. I think it would be corner, depending on what they think about Max Hairston, depending on Dorian Strong's situation, another guy we don't know yet because he's seen the next specialist. I don't know where all that stands. But of course, wide receiver. And if they feel the Bills have to really look, if they go back and do everything we did here, and they're going to do all that right in themselves and say, do we really have somebody on the outside who can win? They may have to look at that. A guy that I think that, is out there that the Bills would be a great fit for if he's available would be Rashid Shaheed. And I say that because he could take the top off of defense, but he also, Erik, he's a really good return man. And right now the Bills have their own return man inactive for a lot of these games. Brandon Codrington, who hasn't done much this year. You could kill two birds with one stone, so to speak, with something like that. I don't know how much something like that would cost you. And it's whether it's him or not, it's someone like that I think could help this team.
I watched Shaheed, Jerry Jeudy, Calvin Ridley, and Chris Olave, just because those are like the common names I brought up. I watched their film this year, and I think it's the two Saints guys that I like the most. Shaheed, if you're talking about beating man coverage, if you're talking about getting plays down the field, explosive plays, and just putting the ball in his hand in any situation to manufacture plays and big plays, he's got that physical ability, that speed element that would be nice in the Bills offense. But if we're talking a high floor guy that you're going to be giving up a really solid draft pick up for, but you would have him for several years, Chris Olave, he is a very good player. I think he has a little bit of everything that the Bills offense could use. And you can use him as a Z off the line of scrimmage, move him around, but you could also use him as an X. He's got that speed. His floor is so high. If you look at the analytics with him, and especially versus Shaheed, he has the higher analytics and higher floor. And I just think he'd be a great fit. I don't know if the Bills want to give up that type of draft pick or pay that kind of money to a receiver, but
the reason I didn't bring him up is because of that. Like, I agree with you. What if you said you could have one of the two? I'd rather have Olave. I just think I'm wondering what the cost would be, right?
Absolutely.
A guy under term who's that good. He does have a concussion bit of history that I think you have to look into as well for somebody. Can I give you a dream scenario trade for me? But I don't. Now he got hurt last week. Jeffrey Simmons.
I know. Yeah. And honestly, I started watching his film, and then it came out that the team said that they're not going to trade him. And so I was like, all right. But that would be amazing. But I think it also would be a nice, there would have to be some finesse to make that trade happen and to make the salary cap fit. Yes. But I'm with you. I think if you're talking the safety position, I do agree. I think it's more in-house. And which makes me wonder, okay, so Bishop's pretty much the starter, right? Do you think he's the starter? Like, if they're going to swap a guy out, would it be Rapp or Bishop in your mind? It's
think
hard.
At this point, it'd probably be Rap, but man, I don't know.
Because if it's Rap, if Rap gets swapped out because they're trying to develop Cole Bishop, then yeah, I would think they would lean towards a veteran in Jordan Poyer versus a Jordan Hancock, right? I think that matters.
Gotcha.
And so, because Poyer, I think even when he was in those snaps against the Falcons, he brought a level of physicality that they've missed since he left. Honestly, like he came down, he laid into Drake London. You saw receivers like watch him as he was coming down from those post safety looks and too high safety structures. So it'd just be interesting because I think they're gonna let Bishop struggle, and he's gonna miss some tackles and stuff like that. But I think if they were to pull one of the safeties, I think it would be Rap. But who knows? We'll see as we go forward.
Can I give a roster scenario here?
Yeah, let's hear it.
So this is me thinking out loud because I'm obsessed with this kind of stuff. Okay. The Bills actually have 52 men on the roster right now. They have room for one more. And I know people say, well, Max Hairston. Well, I don't think Max Hairston's getting activated this week. I think, he's going to practice, but they're not going to put him on. So let's go back to what you said a little while ago about Gabe Davis for a second, because I could see a scenario where Jordan Poyer actually gets signed to the 53-man roster. And because of that, they now have an opening for one more veteran practice squad guy that would be used by Gabe Davis.
Yeah, I can see that, and from what I've heard, Hairston and Davis, they got to meet each other and do some running together over the last couple weeks. So it's exciting to hear some of these guys coming back, whether it's injuries or suspensions. It's almost like getting new toys, new weapons, right? And so
I got a question for you. Speaking of new toys and new weapons, let's go the other way. Do you think it hurts or helps the Bills to face Andy Dalton this week instead of Bryce Young?
It hurts them.
It hurts them.
It hurts them.
Yes.
It hurts them.
I'd rather the Bills face Bryce Young, to be honest with you. I think they can do a lot more against him.
Yes, Andy Dalton has seen this defense, and he's played pretty well against this defense and even the different iterations over the years. That's a great question, and I immediately thought that when Bryce Young went out of that game. I'm like, oh, come on. That's just our luck. But maybe it's Andy Dalton handing it off 35 times that is really going to be the issue, not necessarily him passing through the air.
Well, let's hope the Bills have that buttoned up because Rico Dowdle's a really good player, and they're facing him, and he's going to see the ball a lot this week.
Yeah. Their run game with Hubbard and him are really good. So with that said, what you got going on this week? Let us know what the schedule looks like and what you're going to be covering.
Yeah, so the Bills will actually be back on the practice field tomorrow, which is Wednesday. Sean McDermott will speak to the media just before noon, practice at 12:30. It'll be our first look at Max Hairston back on the field since July 29th, I think it was, 26th, somewhere around there. And
let us know if he's wearing the brace or not. I'm keeping an eye on that, the brace, because a corner can't play with a brace on. I'm sorry.
And I wonder if he even just to start practice, I wonder if he'll be like that, just to kind of make sure everything's stable, everything he's doing. But you can follow me at Sal Sports. I'll have video of that. It's our first chance to see Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi. They will be on the practice field as well. So a lot of changes, a lot of things happening. Practice Wednesday, practice Thursday. We'll get injury report from Sean McDermott, practice reports, injury reports leading up to the game on Sunday. And of course, I'll be all over at WGR550.com and on WGR on the radio.
Awesome. Good to hear, Sal. We appreciate everyone joining us live. If you didn't catch the whole show, this will be posted on all podcast
I like
platforms.
Patio. You actually came up with a new
trademark
word. You got to trademark that. Yeah.
But yes, we appreciate everyone joining us. This has been Turf to Tape. I'm Erik Turner. That's Sal Capaccio. We'll see you next week.